Resuming debate, the honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to inform you at the outset I intend to split my time with the member for Laurier-Saint-Marie. I'm really pleased to be rising to speak to this motion, Mr. Speaker, as the member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley mentioned earlier today in the House. I had a hand in crafting the proposal, and as a new member of Parliament, it was nice to see within my own party the openness that member had to working with the new MP on an interesting idea for how to move voting reform forward. And today it's really nice to see in Parliament that same spirit is prevailing in this place. I've been a long-time advocate for voting reform myself, Mr. Speaker. It's one of the issues that I've held dear through my entire participation in the political process, let's say, and involvement in politics. And part of where this idea came from, Mr. Speaker, we've heard partisan allusions, let's say, about what the government may or may not be intending for a voting reform idea or proposal or initiative. And I don't think anyone on this side of the House is naive that this is the beginning of a process. There may yet be many things that go awry in that process. It's up to the government to decide and Cabinet to decide whether ultimately they're going to take the recommendations of this committee seriously or whether they're going to go off and do their own proposal. So I don't think anyone here is naive about where we're at. And this is a really positive first step, but it's just one step. But I think it's really important because we need to take that first step if we're going to get to any kind of meaningful voting reform. I feel not just from a partisan perspective, though, that it's important that the government not do that by itself. And so that's the second reason that I felt that this kind of proposal was important. Because if you do really believe in voting reform, and if you do honestly want to move that forward, Mr. Speaker, in order for whatever proposal that comes forward and in order for it to go through and be legitimate, it can't just be one party that's pushing it through. And so this proposal is a way of building in at least into the initial stages of that process, that idea that proposals can only move forward with the support of multiple parties instead of just one party, Mr. Speaker. So I think it's right and good in this particular case of electoral reform, which I think is different than just about any other issue, because this is a place where people come to disagree, or people who already disagree come to work that out. And in other places, Mr. Speaker, what happens in Parliament and the differences that you see manifest in Parliament are things that are fought not in a chamber, but on a battlefield. And so we do come here and we do disagree, but we do it according to certain rules and on certain terms. And by doing that, we make sure that we do that in a way that doesn't put people's lives in jeopardy for the values that they hold, and we have an understanding that we're going to work things out with words. It's not always pretty. It's not always nice, Mr. Speaker, but it's a far better system than the kinds of ways of resolving conflict, one way or another, that we see in some other parts of the world. So when you talk about voting reform and how people actually get here in order to engage in, if you want to use a militaristic metaphor, that kind of battle or that kind of argument, let's say, Mr. Speaker, then it's important that people agree on how you actually get here, because those are the basic rules, and it's those rules that ensure that kind of civility. I personally do believe that, if a party makes it part of their electoral platform that they have a particular system and a particular model in mind, and they get overwhelming support during an election, that they may go ahead with that, Mr. Speaker, but not in a way that people in other parties aren't prepared to sign on to. You need at least the support of some other parties, Mr. Speaker. And so this is a way of building that into the process to make sure that whatever comes out of that process, at least at that first stage, is going to be something that a number of members across party lines in this place have agreed on. And I think that's really important because it speaks to the legitimacy of changes. No government should be able to unilaterally change the rules by which people get here. and fix the next election. And in that sense, you know, I do agree with some of the arguments from other members in this place about the importance of not having a government unilaterally change the rules.
You're here.
One of the issues at play for me, as I say, I've been a long time advocate of voting reform. I've also been an advocate of a particular system, although there's a lot of debates to be had about how that's made manifest, but I've been an advocate for a mixed member proportional system, Mr. Speaker, because I think it's really important that people in particular geographical locations of the country have direct representatives that represent particular places within Canada. But I also think it's important that our parliaments aren't composed of false majorities or give a false impression of where Canadians really are at. So when you have governments that get 100% of the power with only 39.5% of the vote, most recently, but we've certainly seen other examples of that, I don't think that works, Mr. Speaker, because I don't think it reflects where Canadians are at. And the problem with the first past the post system is that it tends to generate those issues. And I submit to you, Mr. Speaker, that is also a problem with the alternative vote method. It does it in a slightly different way, but it still produces parliaments that don't actually reflect the division of opinion within Canadian society. So part of the issue there, Mr. Speaker, I think is a philosophical one, if I may, about, you know, whether we're busy electing individual representatives for a particular place, and that's certainly part of it. I think that's important. But I also think that in elections, we ought to be, and we could have a system that allows us to do this better, electing parliaments. And so we're not just electing individual members, we're electing a parliament. And we want a parliament that represents the diversity of opinion within Canadian society. And I think that's one of the major virtues of a mixed member proportional system, is that it allows you to balance out the representation of party within the chamber so that Parliament reflects the division of opinion within Canada, and that the people here are forced to engage meaningfully with people in the other parties and try to come to some kind of, if not consensus, at least decision where, you know, on some issues there'll be a majority that's composed of certain members, and on other issues there may be a majority that's composed of certain other members, because there's agreement between some on some things and between others on other things. And I think that would be fine. So I think that would be a virtue, Mr. Speaker. And I look forward to the day when Canadians can contemplate not just who their local representative is going to be, but also what their parliament might look like. I can imagine the situation. I know there are people, Mr. Speaker, who may feel strongly about a certain candidate locally but not particularly like their party, or may want to vote for an independent candidate but also want to have a say in party. And it's perfectly consistent for Canadians to say, I like this local rep. I'm not particularly a big fan of his or her party, so I'm going to vote for them. But now, because we have a mixed member proportional system, I also get to vote for a different party, a party that's different than theirs. And I'm helping to shape the Parliament and make it more about how I actually think, because Canadians don't always just agree with one party or another party. And so a mixed member proportional system actually gives them a chance to express what may be a kind of division of opinion within themselves, at least with respect to where certain parties are at, and allow them to balance out their own vote in a certain way. So I see that as a positive thing. One of the positive elements, in my view, of a mixed member proportional system that doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that I came to political consciousness in Canada in the 1990s, and it was a time when Canadian politics was very seriously regionally divided. Quebec was largely represented by the Bloc Québécois. The Reform Party was really a Western Canadian party with hardly any seats outside of Western Canada. The Liberal Party was the party of Ontario. That largely, they had some seats outside of Ontario, but actually not very many. And they used that in order to be able to win consecutive majorities. But I can say now, for having sat in a caucus for just over 6 months, how important it is to hear the different regional voices within your caucuses. A first past the post system or an alternative vote system doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get members from all parts of the country within your caucus. Having an element of proportionality allows for that, Mr. Speaker, and I think it would help to quell some of the divisive regional politics that Canada has sometimes seen by having those voices represented in each caucus. I think that's an important virtue of the mixed member proportional system. What I'll end on is just to say I'm really glad that we're taking a positive first step in having a process to get to a proposal that will have to be decided on either here or with some other method. We're not there yet, and I look forward to discussing these ideas more in that during that process, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for St. John's East.
The member for Elmwood-Transcona for his well-reasoned and thoughtful comments on this topic. Today we're just really speaking about the notion of the committee, but I'm interested in his thoughts on how the list would be determined on a proportional system, whether he's in favor of open lists where citizens across the country decide the ordering of the list, or closed lists where parties decide, and also on this notion of how proportional a mixed member proportional system he envisions. Do the votes for individual candidates also count towards the proportionality, or is it just the party vote? Thank you.
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Well, thank you very much. I won't prejudge the process by getting right into the substance of the debate. I do have some preferences on that, but I'm also not a total expert on the details. I think that's part of what we have to hammer out. First, the committee would have to decide that they do want to go to some form of mixed member proportional system. I think it would be unfortunate at the end of the day if the list MPs were just a creature of the leader's decision. I think it's important for internal party democracy that there be some method, either whether it's through the party or whether Canadians directly having a say in who gets elected off what list. So that's where my sympathies lie. But I think that's actually one of the kinds of issues that merits further study, and I look forward to having a committee that can do that and then make a decision not unilaterally by government members, but by members in collaboration.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Mr. Speaker, and it seems like there's a lot of interest to different parties in this, in having a new electoral system. Proportional system, there's about 6 to 8 models out there, and I would like to hear from the member, my colleague there, which system would the NDP prefer to have, at least on a ground base, to know where we can start from here?
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Well, I mean, as I said, the NDP for a long time has been, had as a matter of policy that we prefer some form of mixed member proportional system. That's where I'm at personally as well, and but it's something that the kind of nitty-gritty details would have to be worked out on. We don't have a full proposal, but on principle, I think it's important to maintain the idea of having specific regions of the country and ridings within the country that are represented by an individual whose job it is to represent that, and then to use list MPs to balance out Parliament and make it more representative of Canadians' views overall.
We'll get going.